The learning objectives, let's go over them really quickly, are how to organize and manage the project browser. This is where you can really save a lot of time on your users' experience when they actually navigate through your project. This is extremely valuable for rather larger projects and not so much for a smaller project. Creating pipe types and defining default fittings for the pipe types. I mean, nothing fancy really there. I mean, you can like Google it and you'll find basically how to do it, so nothing exciting there. But I have to mention it for the people that are in the room and eventually what options you have, not necessarily how to do it, but what options you have. Discover new ways to manage the architectural background display through a project template. And actually, I think I just found my third question to pass the book, and that is going to be, today I'm going to show you how to use not a template, how to start a project from a project. And there is certain benefits for going that route. My question is, what are the benefits of starting a project not using a template? Did everyone hear this? Okay, so it's basically you can set up your work where you can have all of the work sets pre-created and pre-linked to the architectural customizations, right? Specify which work sets you want to load. Okay. Sure. Okay. All right. All right. I mean, when I set up a project, eventually I always enable work sets, and eventually I'm going to give them that ability starting from a template or from a project. Either way, I'm going to give them that ability. Families that are used in a previous project are already preloaded. I don't know, man. I mean, every project can kind of have their own little needs, especially mechanical, of what equipments are necessary, so I don't want to have anything preloaded, actually, family-wise in my template. Yes? And what does that do? What can you do with those links besides preloading them? Very good. I'm going to give it to him because I believe that is the correct answer. All of the others, you can activate work sharing starting from a project or from a template. You can do this. What you cannot do starting from a template is control the visibility of linked files. And you cannot define default view templates to those. The Revit links dialog box in visibility graphics does not appear until you have a linked file into your template. So that, to me, was the correct answer. What's that? You can link a file into your template. That is true. You can do it that way, too. Absolutely. You can do it that way, too. All right. We're going to get going here, guys. So, and then, of course, we're going to take a look at what has changed in the class compared to a couple of years ago. How many of you have attended this class 2 years ago, by the way? Oh, wow. Okay. It's only a few people. So the checklist, project browser organization. I'm going to spend very little time in the PowerPoint. Actually, I didn't take the time to make it fancy because I don't believe in it. I want to get my hands in the software and take a look how we do it. With this set, oh, if I tilt my hand, things get a bit loud. Okay, my resolution might be a bit too extreme here. I'm hoping that you can guys see it to some extent, but I'll try to explain as well. So in the project browser, like I said, it is important that you set up some sort of organization that satisfies your needs. And what I have done here is the most common scenario for you considering what options you have, the most common scenario is basically using the default discipline and sub-discipline parameters that Revit MEP template comes with. And people tend to use those to sort out their project browser based on their discipline and sub-discipline, right? Mechanical, and then under mechanical they would have sub-discipline objects such as HVAC, piping, or HVAC ductwork, and so on. What I don't like about this default method is that it is limiting me with the first level, and that is the discipline. I'm referring to using the parameter, let me select it for you. I'm referring to using the parameter called discipline, right here. Currently it is grayed out because my template is, my view is mapped to a view template, and the view template controls the discipline. But the general concept, like I said, is being able, if I'm to deselect this for a second actually, so I can truly show you what we're doing here. I'm going to select none. So basically the concept is you can select mechanical, electrical, and whatnot. Like I said, the limitation is you cannot customize this list. So what I've done differently is I'm using my own parameters that I am able to enter anything I want, and I can create whatever organization I would like. Now, of course, this has the danger of everybody doing whatever they want, right? I'm referring to the users. So what I'm diligent about is instructing the people not to enter in those parameters, but rather select from the pull down. And the two parameters that I'm using are called view group and view type. Right over here. These are nothing but a project parameter that you can add to your project template, actually I should say. And you can see here is the view group. You can enter anything you want in it. You can customize it to whatever you would like. My customization is I divide my views on plot and work. And the reason for that is that plot views is what we put on the sheet. This is where I'm hoping I can preset as much as I possibly can for, you know how it is, 90% of the project. You can never nail your view display for every single project. So keep that in mind when you start setting up your view templates. So my plot views are hopefully set up to like 90% for my projects. And when a user starts, they might need to change the detail level. They might need to change the scale and just a couple things, right? But hopefully not mess too much with displaying visibility graphics objects because it can get really messy over there, especially keeping things consistent across all of the views. So that's my plot views organization. And you can see it on the very top. This is where all my plot views are, and they're going to go on a sheet eventually. Then I have the next level, which is work views. The work views are by default displaying exactly the same geometry like my plot views. The exception is I try to make it very clear work views do not use annotation. So here is the challenge. When users start annotating dimensions, text, tags, the important part is that they do it in their plot views. Otherwise, they just annotated their work view that doesn't go on a sheet. That is not something that they want. Our work views are also set to a wireframe, which allows you to navigate, zoom, pan a lot faster through your project. And when I say a lot faster, I'm referring to really noticeable faster. So keep that in mind. We have two environments. You have the plot views that you just drag and drop. We try to make the work views look as close as possible to the plot views. But this is their playground, I call it, to our users. They can go, they can customize the visibility graphics. They can say, well, I'm running some duct work, but I want to see for a minute here my plumbing so I can go around it, or my beams. That's not something they want to put on the sheet, of course. So they can go in visibility graphics in a work view and really quickly change a couple of things and get it to display what they want. The next level is coordination, what I'm calling. And, you know, the coordination kind of like starts to merge a little bit with the work views, but it's up to you if you need it. So under the coordination, I have divided it on a couple of things. Energy analysis is actually another presentation that I'm doing next week in Washington, D.C. at EcoBuild. And what we've done is we have developed a workflow of how to use a Revit model and do rapid energy analysis with that Revit model. I have a list of do's and don'ts and basically how to get the most out of your model and hopefully teach the architect what to do and what not to do. And these views here allow me to very quickly check what the architect did with the model. Very often they would, for example, when they're creating roofs, they would not actually use the roof command. They would use floor command. And they have their reasons. The floor command allows them to display certain things that the roof command doesn't. So that's a very common workaround for them. So I can instantly see that, and when I export out to my energy analysis software, that's not acceptable, so I need to remodel the roof eventually. And that's my quick answer there. Do I need to do it or not? So kind of like the whole concept over here for all of these views. I'm not going to go in depth what each one of those does, because unless you know the workflow of that whole presentation, nothing is going to make sense to you. So I'm going to pause there on this energy analysis stuff. The next thing is managing certain objects. One of the objects that I see my users constantly struggling with is spaces. Room information doesn't display. They place a space. The space boundary is being cut in the middle of the room for no reason that they think of. All kinds of issues, right? What I've done is, in my spaces views, I'll talk about these letters in a minute. Just bear with me. So what I've done with these spaces views is, this is where I'm displaying pretty much only architectural geometry and structural. I guess there is a little bit of some beams and whatnot, but it's mainly architectural geometry being displayed, my spaces. And more importantly, what I have done here is, I have overridden and made sure that space separation line and room separation line are displayed. What this does is, when a user comes into one of those views, they can instantly see in a very highlighted way if there is any room and space separation lines placed in the current project. Sometimes they would draw something and they would forget to delete it, but it's still there because space separation lines by default in my plot views are turned off. So this is a great way for them to actually identify where, if there is any lingering space and room separation lines. So I distinguish them by color and really using a heavy line weight. Another thing that I do in this view is, I apply a color scheme. Spaces are one of those things that they're not visible unless you select the object. And what I would like to do is, I would like to look at my project and see in color where spaces are placed and where spaces are not placed. So my users can very quickly decide, okay, I missed this chase, I missed this room, or whatever they got to do. But visually, with a snap of a finger, they can find out if there is any additional spaces that they need to place because the architect maybe split the room with a new wall and things like this. That's their playground where they can go really quickly and evaluate if there is a need of any spaces to be placed or modified. And again, all it does is, it is coloring basically all of the spaces. Actually, you know what? I like to do it not by value. You can do it manage spaces, name, and what I like to do is, first of all of my spaces are with a single name called space, because I am using, I'm getting a little off track here, but I have to finish it. The way we display the room information in our projects, there is two methods you can choose from. One is to have your tag look at the parameters space name and space number. When you're doing that, you have to make sure that you're using the space renaming and renumbering utility that is available for free. And in my opinion, this is a downside because I have to run the tool every single time, either before plot or either whenever I get the latest architectural file. Instead, what I'm doing is, for my space tags, I'm having them look at the room name and number. So the room name and number is always current, present. I don't need to do anything, and it's always being displayed. So having this color scheme look at your space name, which always remains space, that's the name of the space. All spaces will be called space by default. They all can get one color. Therefore, you can see the entire architectural building in a single color. I really don't have great examples, but I'm hoping that you guys understanding what I'm talking about. How many of you are completely confused what I'm talking about? Okay, not bad, not bad. Only one person, two people almost. Okay, so I'm glad that you guys keeping up with me. The question is, are all these views created in the template, or am I using some sort of view templates to apply them and kind of like customize them on the go in a project? They are created in the template. Let me make sure I understood the question. The question is, how do you use those views to match the architectural levels as levels change elevations, right? Okay. I'm just going to really dump really quickly this answer for you because I don't want to get off track. There is a checkbox when you're copy monitoring the architectural levels. You can make sure that you are reusing your levels. And what you're doing is you're aligning your levels to the architectural levels first. And then you're using that checkbox to, it's a pull down actually, not a checkbox. It's a pull down, reuse if within offset. So you set that, and when you're copying the architectural levels, you actually use the current levels that already have views associated with. If you need more detail, I can talk to you after the class, okay? All right, cool. So pretty straightforward what the spaces do. So like as you see, I try to really spend my time on customizing things that can get our guys to do things to check their model really quickly. So that's my spaces stuff, okay? Just going really quickly through the list here. I have a duct flow check. And what this one does is, it's again applying a color scheme of, let me say, okay, there it is. It's applying a color scheme for my duct objects. And the way I do this is by range. Any duct work that contains less than 20 CFM, to me, it's either disconnected or maybe they forgot to apply CFM to the diffuser, whatever might be the reason. You can change the value to 1, to 5, to 10, whatever makes sense to you. I did 20. Okay? And everything that is above 20 CFM will get colored in green. So the end result is, you open this view, you look at your entire duct system, and things are either in green or red. Red needs your attention, you go and fix things. Could be CFM data missing, could be disconnection of ductwork. Very straightforward, but in my opinion, very valuable for troubleshooting disconnection of systems and also mistype information of data. The same concept is basically applied to the duct sizing check, and what I've done here is, this is a little questionable. A lot of people are going to argue this is really even possible to be done, but you know, it's a way of looking at it at least. And I've done it 3 ways, okay? So I basically have my friction as the parameter that I'm using to look up my duct systems, and what I have is anything under 0.06 friction, I consider oversized. So there is not enough friction, this duct is way too big for the CFM data going through it, okay? And then I have everything between 0.06 and 0.08 that I consider in green color, everything is checked, well-sized, and then everything above 0.08 is in red, it is undersized. Very straightforward, again, a very quick way to look at your duct sizing of your project and kind of like see which areas need attention. This works great for large ducts, and it doesn't work as well for the smaller ducts like 6 and 8. They may fall, both of them, under oversized. Doesn't matter which one you select, really. So it kind of works for the rather larger pieces of duct, which is something that, like I said, may work sometimes, may not always work. What I'm showing you is basically a concept of just thinking out of the box. I'm not providing you the one way of how to do it. I'm hoping that I'm opening some new ways of you to think about approaching your template. That's all I'm trying to do really here. And you can do obviously the same thing with using, instead of friction, velocity. And you can range it up with whatever values make sense to the project, because that might be very variable as well. So this is the only stuff that I don't have in the documentation, actually, and I do apologize about this, but what I can do is, A, you can get them, or B, I can go ahead and enter those into the documentation. It started going a little bit too big, in my opinion, and adding all the screenshots of those can become a little bit overwhelming. Shoot me an email and I can get you hooked up with those. Those are really easy stuff to set up. But knowing what the at least to go by as a guideline is nice. The question is, where are system coloring schemes falling hierarchy-wise in terms of color display, systems, filters, color scheme, which one overrides which one? To be honest with you, actually, what I do is here, I'm hoping that I don't have any color overrides here, okay? And my color overrides, I'm going to talk about how I manage this, and that's just a preference, is I'm using the latest feature in 2013, which is I'm driving my colors through the system, not through filters. And typically, you can override the system with a filter or with this one. So the system coloring is rather low on the hierarchy, and you can override it with any others. So that's how I manage to display those colors. Otherwise, you're right. If my ductwork supply is supposed to be blue, it's coming from the system, which one is going to prevail? And in this case, any additional colors you add go on top of the system. All right, moving down the list. Grid view. This is one of the things where our guys have spent tremendous amount of time matching the grids of the architectural file. And this is a rather old technique that I've been using, having a view that is displaying the architectural grids as well as the structural, as well as ours. Typically, we might turn off the structural grids from our plot views. My preference is always to use the architectural grids by default. I know that's not always possible. If the architect has grids that are too close to each other, they're going to break the bubbles apart by what I call little z, right? You guys know what I'm talking about? I already have a couple of grids here. So whenever the architect is using this little z, and they break it like this is a 2D change considered by Revit. And what that means is it's a change only for this view. So when the architect does it, it's all fine and dandy for their project, and they can go through the number of views and do it. When we link the project, that doesn't come through. Because annotation changes don't come through, it's only the model geometry that comes through. I will give you my spin on it, how I manage it. But my old methodology, when I cannot convince the architect to do what I would like ideally to be done, is having all of the grids, structural, architectural, mine, in a view where my guys can really take a look and manage them and get a sense of what they should be doing. Again, ideally, you do not want to have grids in your project or template. You want to have the architect managing those. Okay. Match lines. There is a lot of evolution into any of these things that I'm showing you, by the way. You know, Revit MEP is one of those things. Whatever you were doing a year ago, chances are you're looking back and you're like, what am I thinking, really? Or what was I thinking, right? We're constantly changing, we're constantly evolving, and match lines was one of those things for me. We had large projects where we had to split floor plates, and match lines was one of those things where they became a hassle to manage. And the bottom line solution, first we started with creating our own match lines, trying to locate them where the architect has theirs and all that type of stuff. It became a mess trying to manage it. And in my opinion, the best solution is have the architectural match lines display and do not place your own match lines. You can still use the view reference command, and you can decide the continuation of the view on what sheet it goes. That works. You don't need the presence of the match line in your project. So what I was doing, and again, that's rather an old methodology, is comparing my match lines with the architectural match lines. So if you ask me, this can go away. Pasting pipes and ducts. Currently, my template has a little bit over 100 different systems. And I'm referring to pipe and duct, both of them combined. And I'm finding that when you're trying to draw a pipe, Well, let's just say it can become rather challenging selecting from this little tiny pull down between almost 100 and whatnot. So again, this is what I have currently, but I'm moving to another idea. And the idea is having a template that contains a dozen or so piping systems that are what we consider a must for a project. And then if they need argon, met gas, fuel, whatever, they can go and get it from another central file. This way, this pull down stays clean and rather easy to select when they're drawing their systems. So what you're seeing here is not what I'm talking about. But actually, I'm going this way. And what I'm referring to is this view is the view where everything is displayed. So no filters are applied. If you were to draw a pipe or a duct of any sort of system, it will be displayed. And what I'm planning on doing is having a project that will contain all of the pipes and ducts drawn in a plan view, so they can go in, they can read the systems, and they can say, I need this one, I need this one, I need this one. Control-C, paste it in this project, in this view, to make sure that they're visible. And this doesn't carry just the pipe itself, it carries the system with it. And to me, that's a very lean way of organizing your systems when it comes to having 100 plus. Okay, so that's what this view is planned to be used for.
You do that filtering across the pipe type parameters itself, PVC or steel or?
Yes, it will. And I'm going to get to this, how I do my pipe types and duct types. And eventually, yes, it is crucial that you maintain to be the same. You know, the pipe type here and the pipe type there, material-wise and everything, settings should be the same. Scope boxes. How many of you know what a scope box is? I got the advanced group today. I can totally plow through this. Nice. Okay, so those of you, because about a quarter didn't know, those of you that don't know what scope boxes are great to be used for multi-story building that you need to create, obviously, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, HVAC, piping, hydronics, you name it, and you end up with, I don't know, 100 views that all need to be cropped to the same boundary of the floor plan. Scope box is what will allow you to do that. That's what I'm going to leave it at. I'm not going to have time to teach you how to use scope boxes, really. As you can see, what we're trying to do here is give you, as much as I can, of various ways of utilizing the available tools. This view, what I'm using it for is to organize all of my project browser views. Instead of me going through plot views, and believe me, I have hundreds of views currently in my template. That does not add any size to your template. Instead of me going in every single view and resizing the crop region, I have it locked down to a scope box. So a project starts, and the project requires dependent views. Everyone knows dependent views? Okay, most of you. Good, thank you. Thank you for collaborating. So dependent views is eventually the ability to split a large floor plate on areas and have those areas, organized in whichever way you want. You can have A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever makes sense to you. The point being here is going through all of those and trying to match area A on the first floor plan to the area A on the second floor plan to look exactly the same way. It's pretty much mission impossible without scope boxes. But what I've done is I've taken this a step further, and I have pre-associated my area A views to a scope box area A. Now you might say, well, what is the chance that you will have a project with exactly the same crop and then another project is going to repeat that same situation? None. And what I'm doing is, under scope boxes, This is where I am managing my scope boxes. So let's say eventually I would see my architectural background being linked in, and I would come in here and I would say, okay, this is how we need to display this. And I'm basically moving this. And as I'm moving it, there is a number of things happening. My entire project browser, every single area A floor plan is being cropped as I'm doing this. Exactly the same way. So in a matter of seconds, as you can see, I can have all of my area A's looking exactly the same way. Very powerful. But then the question is, well, what do I do when I have a project without areas? Right? That seems a little cluttering. I don't want to have them. How do you get rid of them? There is the other scenario. Well, first of all, that was quite of a challenge, I must say. And the way I managed to do it is, Project Browser does not sort areas, I should say dependent views, in a way that you can easily hold down Shift and delete them. There is always the main view in the way that you might want to keep. You just want to delete the dependent views. So that became a challenge. How do I get rid of those area views when a project does not require those and I want to clean up my project setup process? So what I've done here is a couple schedules. And what I'm scheduling is the view name, as you can see, right? So what do? A project doesn't require areas. I come in here. I click on the very bottom. I drag up. Now, notice that this doesn't scroll up. Just trust me, it works for whatever reason. Right-click, delete the rows. You're going to delete all of those views. Yes, OK. With 4 clicks, I can pretty much get my project from areas setup to a project that doesn't require areas. It is a lot faster and easier to delete than add. Going and managing all of the crop boundaries for the hundreds of area A views, creating those views, making them look in a certain way, I can tell you that my guys are going to need to spend days. Having my template start from that ground, with the ability, of course, to get rid of it whenever I need to, is invaluable, I think. Any questions here? Pretty straightforward. Okay, so that was a pretty cool idea when I came up with it, and at that time, I never seen anyone using it that way. Way back in the days, I did attempt to pre-create areas, but I wasn't aware of scope boxes, and there wasn't an easy way to really streamline their look, and applying those dependent views to be managed with scope boxes resolved that problem. And I think this is definitely a must-have in your template for larger projects. Don't answer. I don't think I understood the question, please. It has 6 instead of 4? That's what you was asked? Right, so the question is, I see you have created 4 areas. What if you have a project that has 6 areas? I have taken it up to that level. You can add 10, 20, as many as you possibly think that you will need. So here is how I approach this kind of challenges. How many levels do you add in your template? How many floor plans, right? I've done it up to 5, and up to 5 levels, and up to 4 scope boxes. New project starts. We're getting a high-rise, 10 stories. I don't go to set up the project. I go in my template. I keep working on this, adding the levels, adding the views, applying the view templates. Now what happens? My level is up to level, my template is 10 levels ready, okay? I start the project, I'm done. I just haven't had a project that requires more than 4. As soon as I get a project with 6, I will get everything done in my template, and then I will have 6 ready. And I will actually maintain that in my template. I would not have it just being done for that project, because I might have another one with 6, maybe in a year. So that's how I would approach it. But yes, I've taken it up to 4. I mean, the next question is how many is the limit, right? And then you have the 4, but I must say that I also have a global one. and that is for the overall floor plan, because besides the areas, you still need to output an entire floor plan, and this one is basically called overall, and that is being applied to my views that are called overall. Here is a little trick. Many of you, I'm sure, already know this, but for those of you that don't, 01 HVAC cannot be used as an overall plan. The overall plan, typically, the difference is nothing but the scale. Everything is the same except the scale. And as soon as you change the area B scale to one thing, that will affect this top level view. So this is the one view that never goes on a sheet in our projects. Instead, you had to create another overall view that the scale is different and it doesn't affect your dependent views scale. Okay, going forward. Okay, going through those views organization. So true north, pretty straightforward. This is the view where I can manage my coordinates and my true north. I make sure that the coordinates are enabled. I have a little grid intersection where it is displaying for me, it's visualizing the 0, 0. And whenever I get a project and the project is way out here, I get a very quick sense of how far off they are from the 0, 0. We know that Revit doesn't like this very well with really extreme large numbers. So for me, I see value to know how the architect is managing coordinates and how familiar they are with this type of stuff. Again, this is the view that is set to true north, where all of my other views are set to project north. Picking up the pace a little bit, 3D scope boxes. It's the same thing as the other, except now I'm able to manage the height of those scope boxes. Color coordination. Another cool thing that I believe it helps people really quickly see where things come from. When you're in a mechanical view, all non-MEP geometry will appear in gray if the mechanical view is set to mechanical discipline. That's what happens. So say you're linking the structural, you're linking the architectural, you're looking at an object. Where is this object coming from? Is it from the structural, from the architectural? It can be confusing. And this is where my guys can come in and really quickly navigate through the model and visualize, okay, this is coming from this guy, this is coming from that guy. They can do, if you want, visual clash detection. You know, maybe they want to just enable the structural file and our mechanical stuff, and they can visually see anything they draw will appear in blue color from our project coming. Anything coming from the architectural 01 appears in cyan, green, red, magenta. You can pick whatever colors work for you as well. And just quickly, what I've done here is I went through a couple scenarios. Of course, this is kind of like evolution. You know, this doesn't come, you wake up tomorrow and you know what to do. You try one thing, it works, and then somebody comes and say, what about this? And I was hoping I can do that, and all kinds of things, right? So what you're seeing is evolution of what I have experienced, hopefully giving you some feedback of what to do. So what I've done is basically I applied a filter that is being applied to everything with a setting of none. What does it mean? Everything my guys create, it will go and basically apply a color of solid blue. And notice how I'm applying the color. So the filter is set to none. The color is set to basically blue color, solid fill. And what this will do is it will make everything really blurry. It's not going to have this nice black edge. So what you also want to do is you want to apply a line color of black so it gives you that nice edge. Otherwise, things are really not easy to see. So that's on getting the blue color from what they draw. Getting the colors from the other files is being done, and that's another thing that I could not do unless I have the links already here. And like we already heard, it can be done in your template or it can be done in your project as well. What I've done here is the same concept, except I'm overriding the model categories, colors for everything coming from the architectural file in cyan color. Certain categories cannot be overridden with a pattern, and those typically refer to MEP. Pretty much everything architectural and structural you can do except the MEP stuff. So to the MEP stuff, instead of applying a pattern, which I cannot, as you can see it's grayed out, I am instead applying a line. And that is things like receptacles and switches and that kind of stuff. You cannot color pattern them. Any questions? Very straightforward. Can you do that same thing with color schemes? You can. The challenge will be coloring the architectural differently from the structural. There's got to be something that makes that object unique. They both draw walls. And they both may or may not care about the function, which can be one thing to filter by, function, structural and not structural. So you're going to have that challenge, distinguishing the geometry where it comes from. And this is really the way of doing it, where you can get down in that file and customize it. One thing to point out here, by the way, by default, Revit will apply a view filter by host. And if I'm applying the view filter by host, that means that it color everything in blue, since I already did that here, right? So you want to set that to none. So the view filter I'm applying here to my object do not go past to the link files. You guys learning anything so far? All right, good. I'm glad to hear it. Okay, color coordination. Elevations, I typically have only, okay, I'm sorry. I forgot you almost. Go ahead. And are you doing that through work sets? Right. Okay. So, if I'm not mistaken, that's not a question, right? So. Right. So the comment is that you can also do the color overrides through work sets. You can do that. Did I get that right? Object styles. There it is. There's always that thing, right, when you're looking and people are watching, you cannot find that one pull down. You guys know all that weird thing, right? Okay. So what you cannot do here is, how do you distinguish the structural wall from the architectural wall? Okay, how do you distinguish, I do have a comment on that, but I'm going to leave it alone. How do you distinguish copy monitored wall that exists in my file from architectural? Okay, but some people may want to have that so they know when they move the major elements like chases. We don't copy monitor walls ourselves either, but I know some may do. In my opinion, the limitation here is you will have architects placing mechanical equipments. You will have architects placing floor drains. I want to know those things. I want to color them differently, and this doesn't let you do that. Floor drain, okay, who manages it, right? You put it to connect to, the architect puts it to display it in their drawings, and it's a very fine line to walk there. And what this does here, managing it through overrides in links, is I can distinguish between my floor drain and their floor drain. And that goes on to a number of elements. I'm just giving you an example. Do you agree? Very good. Moving on. Splash view. I kind of skipped this one, but this is my opening page. How many of you have splash views or opening page? Okay, very good. About half or more. Those of you that don't, I would suggest that you consider it. The idea is the view is a drafting view. Could be a legend. You can kind of like play with the idea really. And this is where Most of the companies keep it very, very simple. Basically, they just say synchronize from this view or something like that, which is fine. I took it to another level where I'm using it for communication between my teams. So as my guys start working on a project, there is always that thing. What did the architect change, right? And there is a number of tools that you can consider using. Drawing Compare, DWF, Design Review can compare those. But it's really going out of your way, exporting drawings and comparing them that way. So, when possible, what we found is that on a couple projects, we were very successful communicating those changes, and not just communicating, but documenting them right here and there, okay? And what it does is, whoever opens the project, they see it immediately what the project changes were at what date. And I'm not referring to writing down every single nudge of a duct. I'm referring to, resize the supply system, move the shaft on the north side, and major changes, right, that we really do need to know about. And it has been working great. It's just teaching the architect and you to kind of work this way. It can take a couple tries. But it has been very successful, really, keeping up to the changes of the project for us. I'm sure you guys didn't hear it way back there. Did you? All right. So he's taking it a step further in his company, and what they're doing is they're doing it in sheets where they're tracking project number, project name, etc., right? Settings. Okay. So actually, I've done in this view as well the same thing. It's not mapped to the parameters of the project. That's the difference. And I clicked that on right away, that you're actually managing that coordinated between the sheets. So that makes sense. I really like that, actually. So what I've done here is also, there is my little file management system. And what I'm doing is, as I get in a project, managing 50-plus projects at any time, somebody asks me to go in and troubleshoot something, I kind of like want to, with a glimpse, get a sense of where this project is and what we're applying to it and what we're not. So if you cannot read really quickly, you can see the Revit file format. And this is a family, by the way. Like you heard, you can do a title block. I'm really liking this idea, actually, because then you can streamline the project information to be looking at the project parameters rather than being independently in two places. So it's all check boxes, what's going to show and what's not going to show, So if you get in touch with me, I can certainly hook you up with this one. It's something anyone can whip up, really. Moving down the list, we have some project due dates. That's one of the things, I'm trying really hard our guys to let me know when a project has a due date, and when I get in that project, I at least know what kind of a rush we're talking about. There is always that thing, it had to be done yesterday, right? So hopefully this gives you a little bit of sense. It doesn't mean I'm going to go every morning and open 50 projects to see which one comes due next Friday, say. But when they do have a project issue, I typically tend to look at this and get a sense of how this project timeline is going. There is, of course, some contact information. If I do have any questions, I immediately know who to contact in the other company, like the BIM manager, or maybe the question is related more to another person. You can see all of this: name, company, phone number, and email. You can do whatever you want here. I mean, this is just a concept, right? Like I said, most companies are taking it just to synchronize here. So this is the view that opens first, and it's also recommended to synchronize from this view, as it will be much more efficient doing so. By efficient, I'm referring faster. All right, moving on. We got to pick up the pace here. We got only 30 minutes, and there is so much good stuff to cover, right? So, going down the list, I pretty much covered the project browser, but now we're going to get into some different concepts. You're probably noticing that I'm not going to get too too much in details in terms of lines and dimensions and text. I do have outlined some concepts of naming convention. Again, this is really what makes sense to you. I'm going to really point them out really quickly at the end, kind of like go through them rather quickly, but I'm focusing on the more custom stuff and not so much on the standard template stuff, because the class description, if you remember, was referring to advanced BIM managers, users, right? So I'm hoping you already have figured this stuff out by now. Keynotes. How many of you are managing and know how to manage keynotes in your projects right now? And I want to hear something. How are you guys doing it? Schedule. Okay, so for a long time, actually, I was hesitant about using keynotes the way they were coming out of the box. I really believed that they were rather architectural functionality and not so much MEP. So I've done a little spin to those, retouched the whole process. In the very beginning, in the past, what I was doing is creating either legends or drafting views, and that's all they are. Basically, they go and enter notes, and they drop them on a sheet, and that's all it is. Now I've taken it to a different level that I believe it coordinates things a little bit better. It is using the benefits of the Keynote function within Revit, and as well as I'm bypassing the limitation of entering a custom node that you really can't do from within Revit. So let's see what I'm doing here. And on this one, I wish I had a more organized view where I can really display it to you. So this is the one part that I made sure I documented very well, because it's new, something that I've done. So it is well documented in the documentation. But with that said, a couple of things. The concept is that under, let me go find Keynote Settings. Under Keynote Settings, you're going to browse to a text file. And the text file, the way I'm doing it, is unique for every project. That text file doesn't have to be blank, but it is unique for every project. Our MEP notes tend to be rather specific to the situation and not so much like the architectural. They can just say this is a 3/4 of an inch jip and just standard notes, right? I'm not saying we don't have standard notes. We do. And that's why I'm saying you shouldn't start with a blank text file. You can start with a text file that contains some standard notes they can pick from, and they can continue developing that text file further from there. So the concept is basically, in my project folder, I am having, where is it now? Keynote Manager file and a text file. The text file, I already have predefined certain organization in terms of sheets and how they're going to get numbered. So everything is being numbered by the sheets. That's how we do it. You can obviously do it in a different way. We really don't have any, at least haven't had the chance to add any default standard nodes, but you can certainly do that as well. And so what happens is you're using a little tool that is actually free. I haven't run it on this computer. Let's hope it runs. And what it does is, this is your interface of entering any custom nodes. And I'm just going to try to do this really quickly. Hopefully it's going to be all fine, right? Okay, Control-C. Just give you a quick sense of what this is all about. So basically, the guys come in here. They fire up this tool. Why am I even considering using this thing, right? Number one, from within Revit, you can browse to the text file, but you can't really modify that file. At the same time, you're not able to have multiple users entering data in that text file at the same time. Somebody got to close it, the other person got to open it. Generally speaking, these type of files are rather not right in it. So they're just read-only, at least for the architectural world. In our world, it doesn't work that way. So what I'm doing is I'm having them use this tool, which allows multiple people to go and enter nodes, so I can have mechanical and plumbing working at the same time on the same file in their little corner of little grouping I have developed for them. So they can just double-click on any of those things or just right-click and edit it and enter their node right here. The downside is that you actually have to go back in Revit. When you're done entering all of your nodes, you have to go and reload. So that's the one downside right here is the reload button once you browse to the text file. Is it ideal? Absolutely not. I wish I can have all of this within Revit, but we're working with what we can, right? And That seems to be working actually the best of what I found. The benefits to this one is, I have put a little documentation, and I can certainly share this one with you, which I haven't done yet. I don't know if I have it actually with me now. Yeah, I didn't bring it. So it kind of like outlines actually the benefits of, I'm surprised I don't have it. I thought I got it. Well, doesn't matter. So it basically outlines the benefits of using this methodology and you know, what to do with it. The one thing I want to say is what it does for us is it makes sure that the little number on the drawing is being coordinated with the view dropped on the sheet. And it also automatically, this schedule, what it does for us is, it is set typically by sheet. So it will actually list only the nodes that are relevant to the current sheet. So the designers don't need to think of coordinating which sheet nodes and key nodes are visible in the current view and making sure that the legend on the sheet is displaying that. That is being eliminated with this method. And second, obviously I can have multiple people entering nodes, and any other benefits I can think of. I think that was really the main part, making sure that our keynote legend on the sheet is automatically coordinated with the nodes on the plan view. They have gone away from keynotes because when they get into revisions and you delete the keynotes, they renumber themselves.
If something is removed and then you no longer need that keynote on a sheet, then it won't just leave that number blank. It reorganizes the keynote.
Before I answer that question, I must ask you, which keynote command are you using to place your keynotes with, or when you were using it? User. Okay, that's the one I'm using too. I haven't encountered this one, to be honest with you, so I don't think I'm comfortable answering anything. I just haven't run into this.
But then you still have to have that keynote somewhere on the sheet because if the keynote's not there and visible, it won't list.
Wait, the keynote number, isn't it? That's what's going to get displayed right here? How is that going to get renumbered automatically? I'm not following this concept. Okay. Okay, I'm with you. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4. But that will coordinate both locations in this case. So even though they're renumbered, I see. Okay. By project? Now, to be honest with you that you're saying this now, this setting was set to by keynote, not by sheet, as I got here. So I may be mistaken when I said by sheet, to be honest with you. I got to go back and look at what we really decided to go by. It says by keynote, not by sheet. So it might be that. And if I'm not mistaken, Dennis, do you remember any of this? If I'm not mistaken, we are actually using the keynote number within over here, if you paid attention. So we're actually using this number right then and there to display on the sheet as well as on the keynote legend. So I think that would avoid this problem. Not, of course, when you need a new keynote, right? You just gotta tell them, that's the Revit way. I can't really do anything about it. Okay, moving on, guys. We got to pick up the pace here. We got about 15, 20 more minutes. So this is what we do for keynotes. Again, I would suggest you look at the documentation a little bit more in details. I tried to compact it down to like about half a page. I really have a document of like 3-4 pages explaining everything in depth of telling the users how to do it properly. So you can imagine that trying to teach anybody how to do templates, it's not really a 10-page document that you can do it, right? Okay, moving on. So what else is in your template? Obviously, we went through the project browser much in depth because you saw a lot of the view customizations that users can really utilize for checking their design and their project and whatnot. How many of you are using, I forget the name of the tool now, of course, but it's that tool that it's project quality check. It's available from Autodesk. They purchased it from Imaginet, I think. Any of you using it? Any of you knowing what I'm talking about? Okay, a few. Yeah, that's kind of like on my next long list of things to look at, right? It's pretty powerful. It can do all kinds of things, and you can get in a project. It kind of starts getting into a little bit of programming and doing all kinds of conditional statements. But it is extremely powerful, and basically you can get in a project and really quickly see, okay, are my guys using the dimension style that I have set up from my template, or have they created a new one? Or maybe they didn't create it, but they transfer project standards, or maybe they, I don't know, copied the title block, and that carried over all kinds of crap with it. Like, how can you check it all those things, right? It can be very challenging managing nice and streamlined styles. So that's one too, actually, that I'm looking at eventually implementing down the road, but that one seems like a big one. So just something to throw out there for you if you haven't heard of it. It should be available, if I'm not mistaken, from the subscription website. Okay. I kind of abandoned my PowerPoint. So I'm just going to go ahead and really quickly. So we got through the checklist. We already talked about project browser very heavily. I want to get a little bit into view templates and filters because there is a lot to talk about there. And in the past, what I was doing with filters is I was actually managing them to use, let me get to them, of course. I was managing them to use system name begins with. That was my thing to start with. It was a lot of work for our guys. They were spending tons and tons of time managing systems to simply get the proper line type and color displayed. Okay? So I'm sure that many of you still see benefit in that method. I decided that performance for my guys is priority, and we moved away from it. So now I'm no longer using system name begins with, and what I'm skipping or bypassing is my guys don't create systems. We're letting Revit create the systems automatically. Every time you hook up an equipment to a diffuser, it actually knows and it creates and assigns it to a system. If I create another equipment next to it with another diffuser, now it creates a secondary system. Typically, it will name it SA1 and 2 using the system abbreviation, adding a unique ID number after it. So it's working great. 2012 up, it started doing it great, and that's kind of like my way of doing it. I heard a couple other classes that they're still sticking to the old way. I don't believe in it anymore. I was doing it. So it's really up to you. You guys know what I'm talking about? Okay. So really briefly, I'm using system abbreviation, and what I'm doing is under piping systems. This is what I was talking about. This list is very, very extensive. I'm planning on cutting it down. What I've done is there is certain systems that you cannot remove from the template, and I kind of don't like them lingering because when I try to clean this up, when I set up a project, I typically have my guys answer a questionnaire, like of 10 questions. So they answered all the questions, so I know, do you have areas? What version of Revit are you going to use? How many levels is your project? So they answer all kinds of questions for me, and I go and I set up their project. And one of the things is, how many pipe systems, what pipe systems do you believe you're going to use? So I basically go and clean it up. Now, if you don't have this Z in front of the default system that you cannot remove, it becomes pain in the butt basically trying to remove it. Because you select with a shift 50 that you want to delete, and there is, of course, one of them that you cannot delete. finding the one is not exactly the easiest thing to do because Revit doesn't tell you which one it is. So what I've done is I pushed all of those down at the bottom with Z. So they're always there. I cannot remove them. And then I can delete everything up above. That's just my way of really quickly cleaning this up. When somebody says, we're not going to have fuel, we're not going to have medical, I can just really quickly hold down Shift, right-click, delete, and it works. Otherwise, it doesn't. How many of you have completed the complete list of organizing your systems, names, and everything? Well, we got 2 people only? Okay, well, those of you that have not, here is a tip. It's one of those things, different companies name things differently, but I would definitely start with something like this. Organize everything in Excel. Trying to go and start making it in Revit, certain areas will get sorted and others will not. Like the family system browser will get sorted, the filters won't, and if you start coming up with those names, it's going to become very painful as they're not being sorted, and it's going to become a big mishmash. So definitely get it started in your Excel. This is what I've done here. Filter name, system classification. And let me explain this one. This is a little tricky since I started utilizing systems for coloring my objects. What we ended up doing is, of course, Autodesk allowed us to streamline the creation of systems, yet we were not giving the full extent of all systems we need to create. So what we ended up doing is, well, we still want to manage or considering managing CFM, GPM, all that stuff. And obviously, there is no system for medical or fuel or you name it, another 100 plus. So our goal was to identify a system what behaves like. For example, I'm going to go to the unlikely ones. What is a fuel oil vent behaving like? Is there another system classification that Autodesk has given us that we can replicate and use that behavior in terms of units, in terms of direction of flow, and all that stuff? And what I did is basically I had a couple of our guys go through the entire list and say, here is the 12 system classification Autodesk is allowing us to use. This is how they behave, and I need you guys to go and say what this behaves like. Because obviously we're getting into very industry sector-specific systems that I really need them to look at that. So basically they went and filled it up and said, medical air behaves like domestic cold water. Okay, cool. And basically that's how we ended up creating our system classifications. And the idea is to make sure that, we will be able to manage units and data of the system. Yes, the little Excel file, there is a snapshot in the documentation. So if you go into the actual, any of those systems, I just want to show you what I've done is, for the graphic overrides, I'm applying a color, and a line type usually here is assigned. For certain, they may be solid, so there is no align type. This one happened to be set to no override because it's solid. And what that does for us is, and it works for us, maybe not for you, is coloring your objects globally. Of course, you still have the ability to add filters, to override them through work sets, to override them through color schemes. The system is at the lowest level, and you can add on top of it with any additional colors. We found that works for us. We're using this to control line types and colors, and we're using still filters to control in what view what system is turned on or off. So that's kind of, we separated the two. All right, picking it up here, and I'm of course using the system abbreviation for my filters to know which system pipe to turn on and off. For this in the past, I had to create unique pipe types, which I was totally against, but it was one of those things that I wished it was working better, and now it is. Okay, so that is how I pretty much manage my systems coloring. As for the filters, I already went and showed you that. I want to touch a little bit into the templates, into the view templates I'm referring to. Again, another area that you can do I don't know, gazillion things here, right? We evolved from all kinds of stuff. We started with, we're going to do HVAC, we're going to do plumbing, we're going to do hydronics, we're going to apply it. That worked fine and dandy, but then we started having problems. Our guys were not necessarily spending time in model annotation categories. They were spending all of their time configuring the architectural background. Trying to match the two was like mission impossible. So we moved from that idea and we moved to something else that is not here, but I'll briefly explain it. It's going by level then. And we did HVAC 01, HVAC 02, HVAC 03, HVAC 04, etc. We ended up with having as many views as many view templates. And I'm like, well, wait a second. Now we defeated the purpose of view templates. Right? So now I'm moving, again, it's evolution. This is not one of those things you can wake up and you know it. Unfortunately, you got to go through your fair share of trial and error. And what I found to us to be working so far is, the way I see it, it's two different animals. Controlling the architectural background is one thing. Controlling our project display of elements is another thing. This is how I see it. The new locking down visibility graphics to a view template is a very good step forward, but in my opinion, to make sure what we need to do is there is something missing still. Seems like we need to have another one to lock down the architectural background, because generally speaking, the architectural background appears possibly two ways. Everything is the same. Maybe some of the guys want to see the furniture and the other guys don't want to see the furniture. That's the one thing I can think of being different. But other than that, it appears the same way across all MEP, the architectural background. So ideally, I wish there was like another view template for the architectural background, which is not. So what I do is, we have created our subdisciplines and applied them to our views. So every view is applied to either HVAC or hydronics. And what that view template controls is everything, pretty much, but Revit links. Okay? It's not ideal. It's not perfect. It's a way for us to still go through the other step of evolution, right? And what I've done is we have configured the Revit link to the point where we believe it's going to be as good as we can think of it. And applied it to all of the views. It's not final. But my hope is that Revit links will not be managed by us. It will be managed by the architects. And here is how I sell it to them. You're having your design being displayed in a number of disciplines all across the board differently. Wouldn't you like to have your design really look consistently across all of your consultants? I mean, that's something that they really want. What does that do on the flip side for us? There is all kinds of elements that there is no way of managing through visibility graphics unless you map to a specific view. Unless you go and you actually select a view from the architectural file, you cannot display hatches. You cannot display line work. You cannot display the grid bubble I showed you earlier how you offset. These things are a pain to manage because they're not something you can really manage globally. You got to go in every single view. And this is where our guys have wasted a ton of time. My new concept to Mr. Architect is, we'll let you show us how you want your design to appear. And that is one view per level that you manage. This is where you control your detail line work, you make sure it exists, your hatch work, your grids, and they're in complete charge of it. You know, it's a struggle trying to convince them with all this, but we had a number of them loving it because now they get a way of synchronizing the look of all consultants. What's that? 2 per level, and then what is that? Oh, okay. So 2, plan view and a ceiling view. I guess that's a very good point. We don't actually print ceilings for us. We're only doing mechanical, actually, and plumbing. Right, for the lighting. We don't do electrical. Now, certainly. This class is not just MP. It's MEP. So yes, what I've done is I basically have pre-linked, and this whole not template, but having a project with all of the files pre-linked has allowed me to do is map to a view. So here is the concept of the whole process. I start a project. All of my views are mapped to a specific view from these files. And by the way, these files are basically architectural 01, architectural 02, structural 1, and electrical 1. We find that we never really get multiple structural and electrical, but here and there we'll get architectural shell and core and all that stuff. So every view is basically mapped to display one specific level. The key is to work very closely with the architect and hopefully convince them and agree on a view naming convention. And what that will do is, as they come in and they give you the file, hopefully they already have created that view. It has the proper naming convention. All you do is in your project browser, in the Windows Explorer, you would basically swap out arc01 with the updated from the architect. I actually keep them always the same name, the link files. This allows me to manage those things. And as you swap them out, everything is fine and dandy. You got nothing to do. You got the architect actually managing the linked file, their file display, any drafting objects, including the grids that have become a huge pain for us. Everything is automated. Obviously, this requires a very, very close relationship with an architect. The way I look at this is, let's get on this. Let's get it in your template. I don't want to keep calling you because you got 10 teams and this guy didn't get the memo, right? So I want to make sure I get with the right person, the BIM manager. I explain the concept. They get it in their template, and that's it. From there, they just have to manage it like any other view, which they do anyway. I let the architect control the display location and everything lengthwise about the grids, yes. The length of the grids is being controlled by the crop region. There is an offset we cannot control, I know that. But that is the same for them too. Now, if they actually do the grids with the 2D instead of the 3D, that will be for that view only. So if they do it in the linked view, it comes through for me fine. So for example, this is the 3D, and they switch it to 2D, and now they pull this to be that short. That's the 3D bubble up there. In this view, they fixed it. As I link it to that view, this is how I'm going to get it as well. That resolves this as well. What's that? Except for enlargement. And the size of the bubble may look a little awkward in certain scales of views. I know. Can't get it all. Yes. Right. Everyone heard this one? I'll repeat it for the recording if there's one. So what they're doing is they're copy monitoring the grids and turning off the architectural grids, and this gives them full access to make the grids display any way they want. This is what I was doing. And it was fine, but very time consuming. Very time consuming. And like I said, it's one of those things, if I can get my guys to spend 0 time on it, tell me what it is. And that's for us, okay? We can get some architects to go with the idea, that's fine. When I cannot do that, I go by that method. So you got to have a couple of ways of doing, dealing with those type of issues. Okay, very briefly, guys, there is obviously a lot of settings that you need to configure, not necessarily the stuff we talked about. I'm going to try to wrap it up here because we're actually going over, and the next guy's going to kick me out definitely. So dimensions, line styles, all of that stuff. Just a quick tip for you. What I've done is, I don't use colors. Everything is black. We don't print by colors, so all of this stuff. Thank you, guys. If anyone wants to leave, I'm just going to wrap it up here. Again, please fill out the surveys if you like the class, and if you didn't like it, please fill them out again, right? So really quickly, we basically organized all of line styles with a certain naming convention. This is in the documentation. Text, dimensions, kind of standard stuff, nothing really to talk about. Just take a look at what I was doing. I have some screenshots. I have some naming conventions. I think I was trying to focus on the rather unusual stuff. There is a lot to be talked about here. I can certainly speak to you probably for a good half a day about templates. So thank you all.